Welcome back to a very special edition of Up to Speed StarCraft, the story so far. During a commercial break, a lot of people were asking very important questions that we're going to answer. But Lauren, Elise, I understand there's one burning question from chat right now.
There is. Everybody's really enjoying what we're talking about. They're all kind of wanting you to talk about Samir Duran. They just want to know what you think about him and how he ties into this story. Could you update everybody a little bit on his lore?
Oh, we'll get to him soon. We'll get to him soon. He is... Man, I get so excited talking about Samir Duran, but we will get to him, I promise. But we need to talk about what happens at the very beginning with the game StarCraft when it came out in the late 90s. We're going to give some backstory to the different characters that lead us through the story of StarCraft in the games and continue on through StarCraft II, Wings of Liberty, and Heart of the Swarm. First off is our main hero, Kevin. His name is Jim Raynor. James Eugene Raynor, for all you guys that want to know his full name. Now, he was previously an outlaw, but when he was young, he lived on a farm. He wanted to take care of his parents. He joined the military. He realized the military was corrupt. He met a friend named Tychus Finley. They decided to go AWOL. They became outlaws and robbed from the rich, pretty much. They never murdered anybody. But it came down to a scenario where Jim didn't want to be an outlaw anymore. He wanted to do the right thing. And what had changed him is he was sending money home. His father had passed away in a tractor accident. He went and saw his mom right before she passed away. There was a hollow vid of his father on his deathbed at the hospital saying, "Jim, I love you. You're my son, but I can't say I'm proud of you because I know I taught you better. We can't take your money," because he was continually sending money to him. And that really hit Jim hard. And one of the things his father said at the very end of the video was, you know, "We are who we choose to be, Jim. We can always make a choice that changes us. We always have that ability to do so." And Jim knew that he wanted to make the right choices, and so Tychus and him were going on a run to do this big robbery, but it went awry, and Tychus took the fall and told Jim to go. It was a very, very heartwarming thing for Tychus to do because they both were rough tumbler dudes, and they kind of joked to each other that Tychus could never do anything honorable, but Tychus in the end, he's like, "You know what, Jim, I can," and he let Jim go. And Jim went to Marsara, became a Confederate marshal, met a girl named Liddy, short for Lydia. They had a son. The son had psionic abilities. Unfortunately, he died in a tragic accident, or so they were informed, that when he went to the Ghost program. And his wife died a little bit later on because of grief. And that's when we're introduced to Jim Raynor at the beginning of StarCraft I.
Oh my
God!
God!
Now, in addition to Jim Raynor, we're also introduced to our particular character, which is the Magistrate, as we were talking about yesterday, who is Miles Hammond.
Miles Hammond. That's right. That's right. Miles Hammond's a great guy. He was a family friend of Jim Raynor, and that's who you play as the commander in the Terran campaign for StarCraft I. You play as Miles Hammond. I'm going to put an asterisk next to that because it was inferred to in in Devil's Due that that's who it is, and people have always wondered who was the commander. The Magistrate becomes the commander and works with Jim.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say Clutch says, according to the Gospel of Clutch, it's Miles Hammond for the StarCraft lore. So he's our main hero. That's who we are associated with in StarCraft II Wings of Liberty throughout that campaign. And that's his backstory before the first game. Let's move on to Sarah Kerrigan, Sixen. This girl has had such a traumatic childhood. When she was a little girl, she lived with her parents, obviously, and she was outside one day playing, and she caught a butterfly, and she wanted to show it to her mom. And she ran up to her mom with the butterfly in her hands, and her mom was upset because her and her father were going to town, and she needed to get cleaned up, and she was dirty again. And she went to show her mom the butterfly in her hand, but she accidentally crushed it and killed it when she was trying to keep it safe. And her mom berated her a little bit, like, "Oh, Sarah, you know, you try to keep it safe, but you killed it." And Sarah was so upset about this, she screamed, and she had this psionic explosion, and it blew her mother's head apart. Right terrible. In front of her father.
Like literally?
Literally.
Her
mom was killed right in front of her. And so
like her head exploded?
Her head exploded. Yeah. Exactly. You know, it seems crazy, but that's what happened.
Is there video of this?
No, there's no video. There's no video. It was in the books because it was so graphic.
I want to see her head explode.
But because of this, she was sent off to the Ghost program. And she continued into the program for a while. She was a very, very, very well-trained assassin. And she was actually called the Queen of Blades while she was an assassin because she was so good with using knives. Now, she is the main character in Heart of the Swarm, but this backstory is really important because it shows just how difficult her life has been and that she has been a weapon most of her life.
I just
go
wanted
ahead,
to add
Sixen.
here,
Yeah.
Clutch. So according to the Ghost program, there's this thing called the Psi Index, and it's out of 10. It's essentially how strong your psionic powers are. And Kerrigan was actually a 10 out of 10, leading them to even revamp this index because nobody had ever gotten to such a level before. So she is potentially the strongest ghost to have ever entered the program. The second strongest being Nova, who is a 9 out of 10. We're going to touch on her in just a little bit. But yes, I just wanted to add that in there because it's very important. She's pretty much one of the strongest Terrans to have lived.
Psionically, and the psi,
Yes.
the science of this in the Terran world is that if you have any of your children that are sensitive to psychic abilities, that they're sent off into the Ghost Academy, into the Ghost program. And people are, this is kind of a new experience for the human race, is that they're seeing more and more of these psionic individuals, and they want to use them as weapons. That's what the government does. But thanks for bringing that up. We'll move on into what happens to Sarah Kerrigan a little bit later as we move into the story. The last biggest person to talk about character-wise before we delve into the story is Arcturus Mengsk. This person is one of the... that's Valerian. Now the picture says that's his son. But his father, Arcturus, is one of the greatest tacticians in the history of StarCraft. And he is able to pretty much know 16 steps ahead of himself. There he is. Within his plans. Now his history is he grew up in a very well-off family, a very rich family, and they were a little bit upset with the current government, with the Confederacy. He decided to join the Confederacy in the military, and later on he left to be a civilian prospector. Now, because of the descent that his parents had and the rest of the planet where he was from, Core Hall 4, the Confederate government, the Terran government, nuked the entire planet. And because of that, Arcturus Mengsk wanted vengeance. He started the Sons of Korhal, and that's where you meet him in the first StarCraft game. He is a terrorist group that is trying to destroy the corrupt government. I find him very, very fascinating, Sixen, especially in the books that talk about him. One book in particular, I Mengsk.
Yep, definitely. And then as far as StarCraft 1 goes, it almost, or at least at first, it pits it out to be like Arcturus Mengsk is the good guy. It makes it seem like he's doing this for a very just cause, and I mean, perhaps his motives might be just, but it seems like he's the good guy, which is why in StarCraft 1 we end up going ahead and aligning ourselves with him, right? Us, Sarah Kerrigan, Jim Raynor, Edmund Duke, lots of these important characters from the original StarCraft. We align ourselves with Mengsk just to find out what happens next.
Exactly. That's what we see mainly in the main storyline for the Terrans, is you see the rise of Arcturus Mengsk. Now, to get deeper into what happens, and this is reviewed in StarCraft II Wings of Liberty with a beautiful cinematic about the betrayal of Kerrigan. What had happened was Arcturus Mengsk wanted to use psi emitters. There were these beacons that would attract the Zerg to attack specific locations. He wanted to use the Zerg as a weapon. He put those psi emitters on the capital world Tarsonis to attack the main government. Jim was completely against this, and Sarah Kerrigan was completely against this. But Arcturus said, listen, this is what we're going to do. Do it. So on that planet, Sarah Kerrigan is there doing her job, but they pull out of there, leaving her there. Arcturus Mengsk gives the command to move out. And Jim is devastated by this, and Sarah Kerrigan is overrun. Now, Arcturus Mengsk made this decision to fulfill 3 reasons. The first reason was because she was becoming a dissentive, she was becoming a voice that was objecting to what he was doing. 2, to make an example of her for all of his subordinates, of her insubordination, that it would not be tolerated. And 3, which is a really, really deep level that not a lot of people know about this unless they really go deep into the lore, is that Sarah Kerrigan, when she was an assassin under the Ghost program for the Confederates, she murdered Arcturus Mengsk's parents. She does not remember it because the Ghost memories are wiped after every mission. So he wanted vengeance against her, and he did so with leaving her behind and being overtaken by the Zerg. But it didn't really pan out the way he wanted or anybody thought it would happen with Sarah.
Now, Clutch, I would almost argue that this is one of the most important pieces of StarCraft history. I mean, honestly, if Mengsk didn't send Kerrigan out there, we wouldn't even have StarCraft II.
Mm-hmm.
Or even Brood War, or the end of StarCraft 1. So this is extremely important for this to have happened.
It is.
I just want to point that out.
It is a huge catalyst that continues on the story of StarCraft II. Now, we've talked enough about the Terrans. That's the state of the Terrans. Arcturus Mengsk takes over the government. He becomes emperor. He is the leader of the Terrans in StarCraft I. In the Zerg campaign, you have to guard this chrysalis, and when it hatches, guess what? It's Kerrigan, and she's infested. She is the Queen of Blades. She still maintains a piece of herself, as the Overmind dictates that she still has her fiery spirit, but she is under the control of the Zerg with the infestation. Now, when that happens, she, when in the chrysalis, sends out dreams or communications in people's dreams, like Arcturus Minx, Jim Raynors, and even the Protoss, of what had happened to her, and that attracts all of them to the planet that she's on, and then she hatches. And a fight breaks out pretty much between the people that are there. But this is also a very, very crucial moment as it moves into the Protoss, Sixen, that Jim Raynor is actually meeting up with the Protoss on this planet to find out what happened with Sarah Kerrigan. And he gets to meet two special individuals, Tassadar and Zeratul.
And this is actually really cool, because what's going on here is that Jim Raynor is actually witnessing Tassadar teaching Zeratul, and vice versa, both the ways of each of their particular racial divides, if you will. So we've got Tassadar and Zeratul kind of coming together, talking about both the Kala and the Void, which, again, this is unheard of. This is kind of stricken. You're not allowed to do this. So it's very interesting. And not only is this happening, but again, Jim Raynor is witnessing this happening, and he's actually understanding. Not only is he understanding, but they're taking the time out to kind of include him in these things. So it forms a very, very special bond between the three of them. And again, this makes Tassadar the second and I'm pretty sure the only other Protoss, aside from Adun, to be able to utilize both the Kala and the Void powers. So this is very, very interesting. Some of the books actually imply that Tassadar may be Adun reincarnated. So it's very interesting. We're going to come back to that in just a little bit in StarCraft II. But these are very important events. The three of these guys, they form a nice little bond. And this actually leads us up into the end of the original StarCraft. So Zeratul and Tassadar determine what it is exactly they need to do to kill Cerebrits. Now, Cerebrits are just like little subordinates to the Overmind. Again, they're still doing his bidding, but it kind of helps him organize things a little bit better. So prior to this point in time, it was almost impossible to kill a Cerebrit, because what happens is you destroy a Cerebrit, the Overmind just kind of rehatches it, and that's the end of that. So Zeratul determines that the Void is actually necessary to kill Cerebrits permanently, so he goes and kills Zos. And when he kills Zos, he actually links his mind between himself and the Overmind. And this allows the Overmind, this allows Zeratul to read the Overmind's thoughts, but also vice versa. So the Overmind finds out where Ire is located, and this kind of helps us push into the end of StarCraft I and the beginning of Brood War. The Overmind and the Zerg take over Ire. The Protoss put on a nice little defense here, but in the end of the day, Tassadar ends up giving himself through the Ganrathor, which is his nice little carrier. He commits suicide, basically explodes using both the powers of the Kala and the Void, blows up the Ganrathor inside of the Overmind, and this is how StarCraft I ends. Tassadar kills himself in the Overmind, so as far as we're aware now, Tassadar is dead. Very interesting point here.
Correct, and it's quite an emotional cinematic when you watch it. Tassadar focusing all his energy, and it is a very, very crucial time for the Protoss, because their homeworld is almost eradicated by the Zerg, and they have to flee after the Overmind is destroyed to get back to the homeworld of the Dark Templar, which is Shakuras. Now, the Dark Templar, when they show up, the Conclave, which is the government of the Protoss Templar, are like, what? You cannot talk to these people. They are cut off. They need to be killed. And it's this racial tension that happens between this race of the Protoss, of the Templar, and the Dark Templar, and it bridges a gap that has been a wound. It has been an issue with this race for such a long time, because they have a common enemy, the Zerg, that can completely wipe out their race. Now, at the end of StarCraft I, we see that, and Kerrigan, as the Queen of Blades, interesting point, when they were on the planet with Tassadar and Zeratul, she actually fights all three of them, and she's very powerful.
Yes.
And at any time, ladies and gentlemen, Kerrigan can kill Jim Raynor. She's that powerful. But her and Jim had a relationship. They were in love with each other before she got captured. And I still feel that there is that love within her, within Sarah Kerrigan, as part of the Queen of Blades, that stops her from hurting Jim. I think that the biggest weakness that the Queen of Blades has is her love for Jim Raynor. But that changes. Something very significant changes in Brood War, and that's why Brood War is very crucial, not in the geopolitical scheme of the entire Korpulu sector. The Korpulu sector is the name for the area, this region where we're at. It's mainly this change of the characters, the relationship of the characters that are very, very pivotal into how they feel about each other working into StarCraft II. Now, at the end of StarCraft 1, as we said, the Overmind is destroyed. They go back to Shakuras. And on Shakuras, Kerrigan shows up. And she's like, hey, guys, the Overmind's dead. I'm okay. I'm still infested, but I'm still myself, so you can trust me. And we got to kill all these Cerebrits that are forming together to create a new Overmind. And they're like, okay, we're really cautious about you, Kerrigan, but we'll join up with you because we have a common enemy. But this is exactly what Kerrigan wants. And she is able to manipulate the Protoss Dark Templar matriarch Rasha Gal to side with them. And she actually kills the Judicator Aldaris, who was a dissenting voice among the plans to join with Kerrigan. So some key figures are manipulated or killed, and the Protoss are like, whoa, Kerrigan, get out of here. We are never going to side with you again. You are evil. You've betrayed us. Leave. She's like, fine, I used you guys to destroy the Cerebrits anyway, so I have more control. See ya. And then she leaves. And that's the beginning of the Protoss campaign for Brood War. But then another entity shows up, and it's all the way from Earth, Sixen. And they are here to pretty much take control. But can you go back and tell us the history of Terrans, where they come from, why they're so far away from Earth before we move into the UED?
Well, it's very interesting. The Terrans are all kind of, well, I mean, the Terrans, okay, first off, they did start off at Earth. This was kind of where things began. So the Terrans, all this time, thousands and thousands of years ago, as far as I'm aware, they still did exist. So they were just kind of hanging out, also a very, very young race building up. But the Xel'Naga just, for whatever reason, decided not to touch the Terrans. And then, of course, as time went on, the Protoss became much more evolved, as did the Zerg because of the Xel'Naga. And the Protoss, for whatever reason as well, vowed not to, or tried not to, get in the way too much of the Terrans. So again, this is all going on within the novels, although we can kind of see some of the implications throughout the games. Of course, as Clutch and I were talking about earlier, we see that Tassadar and Zeratul are teaching each other, but at the same time taking out the time to teach Jim Raynor as well.
Yeah.
So again, the Terrans are kind of just hanging back, all doing their own thing. So the Confederacy and the Dominion are fighting. Again, the Dominion was what Arcturus Mengsk called his sect, his revolution, after they were already the Sons of Korhal. So again, we've gone through the Terran Civil War. We've gone through pieces of the Protoss Civil War. This is all going on through the StarCraft I and Brood War. So essentially, the original game and its expansion are all about the civil wars between all three races. So again, we've gone through the Dominion rising up and taking over the Confederacy, and now we have the UED, or the United Earth Directorate, who enter in Brood War. Now the UED decides that it's their job to take control of the Zerg. They're not really happy with what Arcturus Mengsk is doing, although not many people are. In essence,
let me jump in real quick, Sixen, because I know some people are asking themselves, well, if they're from Earth, why weren't they involved in the Korpulu sector with the Terrans? Well, way back in the day, I make an allusion to Australia, like the English Empire would send prisoners and political dissidents to this island of Australia, and then it became its own nation and grew to be its own nation. The same thing kind of happened in the world of StarCraft. They put a bunch of prisoners and political dissidents on a bunch of ships, but they went off course and crashed in the Korpulu sector, and then they started their own governments, and that's where the Terrans come from. So I just wanted to put that out there so people could see the separation between Earth and the Terrans, and that's why Earth moving in is a threat, because they want to take control of this nation. I mean, this entire government that's separate from Earth right now. But keep going.
So this is prior to. So this is back when Tarsonis was the home world. Again, the Dominion and Arcturus Mengsk went ahead and kind of blew everything up with the Psi-emitters and the Zerg. So the Dominion, like Clutch was saying earlier, utilized the Zerg for that. Again, so all this time, Earth, or Old Earth as they're calling it, because again, this is a much more evolved race. So the people of Old Earth, they're kind of, they're supposed to be this not very rich. Again, all the ritzy people are the kind of the ones that got to travel into space, and the poor are who stayed back on Earth. However, it seems like all of Earth got together, and again, this is what I started talking about, the United Earth Directorate. So this is all the countries of Earth coming together, making up and forming their own league, if you will, to try and come in and enter the Korpulu sector themselves. It was almost as if they were forgotten about the entire time. So again, this is kind of where we're at in Brood War. The UED comes in, and they're on, I don't even remember what the name of the planet is, but it's the new snow tile set for for Brood War, rather. And we're just here gathering resources, and all of a sudden we meet this guy who's also he just happens to be there. It's like a very odd coincidence, but again, we as the player don't really think anything of it. We're just, hey, this is fun. We're playing StarCraft, and we're gathering resources, and we run into this guy, Samir Duran. And again, he's just kind of hanging out, and we don't even really question what he's doing there. We're a little bit skeptical, but he's going to help us. So, all right, we're good. We like this coincidence. So Samir Duran steps in.
Well, it's funny, too, because the two leaders of the United Earth Directorate, Admiral Dugal and Alexei Stukov, Stukov is super elated that this person who was part of the Terran Dominion is going to help the UED, but then Dugal said, I know you may like him, Stukov, but he is a traitor. He'll always be a traitor in my eyes. And as a young 14-year-old kid when I was playing Brood War, that always stuck with me of, wow, that's kind of true. Like, even though you traded to the good side, in his mind, he's still a traitor. So you got to be careful for him. That's very, very key as we talk more about Samir Duran, just how much of a traitor he is. But please continue.
It's almost like his theme song, right?
Yeah, it's his MO.
It's like a running theme with Samir Duran.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he doesn't show up and kind of trait, or I guess that doesn't even make sense, but kind of become more traitorous to the rest of the StarCraft lore.
Yeah.
So where were we? What were we talking about?
So the UED shows up and they want to control the Zerg. That's where we left off.
So I mean, in essence, that's kind of what Brood War is all about. So the Brood War itself is all about Kerrigan trying to figure out her place in the world, trying to, well, definitely doing it, manipulating the rest of the races. So again, Mengsk and Raynor and Zeratul Tassadar, or Tassadar is dead for the time being. So Kerrigan's manipulating all of these races, although the UED are not happy with this. So Kerrigan gets everybody to kind of help out, aside from the UED, kill off the rest of the Cerebrates in this new Overmind. At the same time, doing her best to wipe out the UED, which in the end ends up happening. So, I mean, that's kind of the short term what happens in Brood War. Basically, like Clutch had mentioned earlier, the political affiliations don't really change here. What happens in Brood War is kind of like its own special event. Basically, Brood War is a lot about character progression. Kerrigan kills Phoenix twice, that poor guy. And actually, this is very important. Jim Raynor, when I believe when she kills him the first time, not the second time. When she kills him the first time,
he dies.
As a zealot.
He dies to the Zerg under control of the Overmind, protecting. I don't think he's protecting Ara. He was on a different planet, and then he comes back as a Dragoon. And you're like, dude, Phoenix is still alive. He's like, hey man, it's gonna take more to kill me. And so he's in the Dragoon, but the second time, Kerrigan betrays him. Right in front of Jim Raynor's eyes and kills him. It's very sad.
Right, and this is where Jim Raynor says for the first time that he's going to be the one that kills her, essentially. So, again, very important. Lots of characters kind of live and die. Alexei Stukov is killed. Dugal commits suicide towards the end because he realizes that things aren't going to go his way. Again, this is the UED. So, Brood War introduces the UED and then at the same time kind of eradicates the UED. So, all this really means for StarCraft Wings of Liberty and StarCraft II moving on is that the UED is out there somewhere kind of reestablishing themselves, but otherwise Brood War, again, well, not just Brood War, StarCraft and Brood War are both all about civil wars between each of the races.
Correct. No vessel ever made it back to Earth from the UED fleet, but I'm sure a message was sent, or different spies in the sector were able to communicate to Earth what exactly happened. Now, Samir Duran is the one that ties the thread right after the end of the Protoss campaign. The Protoss in the campaign are able to eradicate all of the Zerg on Shakura, so they're safe for now, but Zeratul is trying to investigate what is going on and how to stop this, and also contacting Raynor and Phoenix. In the Zerg campaign, Samir Duran, he betrays the UED, he kills Stukov, and by tricking Dugal, and then he's actually a Zerg infested, or so we think, and he's working with Kerrigan to secure her plans. Now, because the UED is such a threat, it becomes an us versus them scenario again. This time, Kerrigan coming to the Protoss and coming to Jim Raynor saying, hey, we have to destroy the UED because they're able to control the Zerg. If we don't do it, they're going to wipe out this whole sector and enslave everyone pretty much. And they're like, well, we don't trust you, Kerrigan, but you're right. We have to kind of help you. And she forces the Protoss to help him too. She kidnaps Rashagal. But in the end, it's just so that she can get control of the Zerg and wipe out all of her allies at the same time. So she kills Edmund Duke, she kills Phoenix, and like you said, Sixen, which is very crucial. And a lot of people brought up a lot of criticism about this because of Jim Raynor's attitude in StarCraft II Wings of Liberty, that he says to Kerrigan, I'm going to be the man to kill you someday. I'll be seeing you, and he takes off. I'm going to get into that a little bit more about the character progression of Jim Raynor in StarCraft II. But moving on, Samir Duran. at the end, the Zerg campaign is gone. He is not to be found. Kerrigan's like, he's gone. I don't know where he went. He's betrayed me as well. While Zeratul feels completely crushed by having to kill his own matriarch to free her from Kerrigan, and also feeling responsible for Ire being invaded because he shared memories where Ire was when he hit the when he hit the Overmind with his Asai Blade when they touched during the Power of the Void. Zeratul goes for a scouting mission. And before we go to commercial break, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave you with this video that maybe reveals more of who is Samir Duran.
I've never seen a creature like this before.
Test subject 29 classified. Protoss Zerg hybrid. Imperfect cryohibernation. Psionic emanations minimal.
No. Magnificent, isn't it? What? Who are you?
I've had many names throughout the millennia, young prodigal. You would know me best as Samir Duran.
Kerrigan's card sort. Is this part of her twisted schemes?
No. Young Kerrigan could not have engineered this grand experiment. Although her rebirth into this Zerg swarm has sped up my progress, I can assure you that this endeavor is quite beyond her narrow understanding.
If you are not her pawn, then what are you?
I am a servant of a far greater power. A power that has slept for countless ages, and is reflected in the creature within that cell.
Have you any conception of what you've created here? Do you have any idea what this hybrid is capable of?
Of course I do. This creature is the completion of a cycle. Its role in the cosmic order was preordained when the stars were young. Behold the culmination of your history.
All I behold is an abomination.
Your violence, young prodigal, is typical, as is your inability to comprehend the greater scheme of things. You can destroy all of the specimens here. It will do you no good. For I have seeded the hybrid on many, many worlds. You will never find them all before they awaken. And when they do, your universe will be changed